Wow. That's awesome. It gets me every time.
Weird as shit. I don't understand it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for making time this morning, mate.
No worries, mate. That's the most formal shit I've ever heard in my entire life. Well, thank you for fitting me into the schedule, sir.
Thanks for penciling me into your very, 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 very booked schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a problem. Dude, how are you feeling after boxing?
With the boxing, a little bit when you don't like normally throw punches and then you start throwing punches without like wraps, like the first thing that you notice is like these little twings around like your wrists a little bit.
Yeah.
Are you getting like a little bit of that?
My wrists are gassed, like they're done. They hurt so much. Ankles as well.
Yeah.
It's just my left.
How about your sternum? You won't let Chrissy G know that like you got you here.
The sternum's all right, but I think you got me in the chest. I'm like, ow. Owies.
Oh, did I get you in the chest as well?
Yeah, I think you got me in the chest, which is
on the nips or
not the nips.
on the nips.
The nip. The nip doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
Pain is pleasure.
Yeah. All right, I reckon we start. So I think there's a couple ideas that we'll go through, but let's just keep it really casual. Hey, we'll just start it with like a bit of informal chit chat, and then we can just go into anything you want to talk about. What do you reckon?
I'm feeling like we've already started, kind of thing. Like the boxing's the first thing, and then we just get cracking.
Yeah.
I had a question.
That's good.
What was I about to ask you?
I
don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Actually, you know what?
Go.
I think like on the note of, trying to get like the right start, I think that could be like a good segue into whether you think like first impressions are important.
No, I think, absolutely. First impressions are definitely important. I mean, it sets up the kind of entire interaction.
Yeah.
Gives you a chance to kind of frame who you are and frame the point of the conversation. And yeah, I think they're wildly important. That's why in more formal kind of interactions, I wear something more like a polo.
What context do you normally think of when you think of first impressions? Obviously, we're doing a podcast. People are watching and listening, but also, like, I suppose outside of what we're doing now, what sort of context do you think of when you think of like first impressions?
Here's a good point. Like, if I am being honest, when you first said like first impression, I meant like one-on-one personal interaction, and my head went there straight away, like in person kind of stuff. But I don't know. I find like comfortability in just kind of like me being me all the time, regardless of like whether I'm on the camera or whether I'm meeting someone in person. Like sometimes you see, there's a big difference when you see people like influencers or something online, and they're in person via the in comparison to their like on camera is just wildly different. It doesn't even make sense.
Absolutely.
It's not like we're influencers, for Christ's sake. This is our third podcast, but like, I don't know. I think when everything mirrors up, it's kind of, I don't know, maybe better for the audience, but it's also, I guess, having that integrity that we always talk about and kind of continuously being yourself. I find comfortability in that. And when it comes to like first interactions, you do think about them kind of like, if I'm more in a formal setting, I like to wear like a nice polo shirt. If I'm, just vibing with the boys, I like to wear like not a decent hoodie or something like that. Like kind of just dependent on the situation, some things change, but at least keep the integrity behind everything. Like try to be as much me as possible.
Yeah, it's an interesting point with seeing someone one-on-one and seeing them in person versus on a call, like work related thing is, I suppose you've got more senses, so you can see them, you can see their body language, you can see the way they're presenting in terms of like the way they're dressed and the warmth, the vibe you sort of get. Whereas if it's a phone call, you're limited to tone and the actual things they're saying. So yeah, interesting point. I think like with the real life example, when's the last time you had the opportunity to give a first impression? I suppose meeting a stranger for the first time.
We do have clients come to the house not as often anymore due to like COVID and stuff like that, but sometimes we're meeting up someone who's like kind of messages through Instagram and wants to catch up or something like that, and you like those kind of interactions. Yeah, it's hard with like obviously COVID, like people don't come over anymore and we don't really leave the house, but I guess I can't remember specific examples. Have been maybe so long, but yeah, like my first go-to every single time is like either shake someone's hand or give them a hug, depending on kind of their aura, their kind of vibe, and always like ask their name and kind of repeat their name back to them. I read that in a book somewhere. Makes them feel like more welcome and just kind of bring the positive energy vibes, and just kind of just ask good questions, get them to try and open up. Like my goal is always with an interaction is to always get them to like open up and feel like they're at home, feel part of the community, feel relaxed, because that's when you kind of have the best conversations like we do. It's when you can get the most information, which means you can help the most. So yeah, it's kind of all about just making them feel welcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
when I first met you, I remember just like, smiles all around, and straight away, you came straight up and gave me a shake. I'm pretty sure you gave me a hug, to be honest. Like that was like the first thing you did.
yeah.
So that always like feels, you're bringing down the walls, and like I got the warm vibe of you like straight away, and it was like you were saying hello to someone you sort of knew for a long time, even though you're meeting them for the first time. And you're good. You're really good at asking questions and getting people to talk, especially like if you have someone who's a bit more shy. I'm sure we have like friends that we meet that are, you don't need to ask the questions; they'll just start talking.
I reckon I was like that young. Like,
what was that? Sorry,
I think I was like that young.
Yeah,
just talking for the sake of talking, like scared of silence and just wanted to fill the gap.
Yeah.
Now I don't know. Now like I just like listening, so I try and ask questions that allow me to like listen more and fucking get as much information as possible. So, but it's glad you felt that way, because that's kind of what we try to achieve every time someone comes in. So if it goes noticed, that's that's a bonus. It's a win. Like, yeah, I guess you've been around when we see other people as well, and like you mirror that immediately.
Yeah.
So is that something you obviously didn't get it from us, because like it's kind of already second nature for you. Did you learn that somewhere, or?
Well, I think I try to be like warm anyway, but hearing it put into words, so like through our conversations where you've said that you reflect on your day-to-day encounter, so at the end of the day or at the end of the week, you'll think about the interactions you've had throughout the week and reflect on how they actually went. Did you provide value? Could you have made the conversation better for the other person? Could you have made it better for yourself? And that got me thinking a little bit about how I'm perceived, because one person can act the way they do and then be perceived in 5 different ways by 5 different people. And this is really evident where, someone new comes to the group and then there's a conversation about that person afterwards, and it's like, what did you think about such and such? And you've got like, varying sort of opinions. So it makes me think like it's kind of important, but like I don't think it's the end all be all. But I think it's like worth considering how you sort of come off like with certain people. but at the same time, like rarely do you kind of um, judge people completely by first impressions anyway. But it is kind of human nature to kind of, you know, put someone in a box when you first meet them and you go, hey, he's funny, he's this, he's that. Um, but I think that's more biological than anything.
Yeah, I mean, just humans are complex creatures, right? So
Yeah.
just kind of putting someone in like a specific thing just from what you've seen off like a small interaction. Like if someone tells jokes, they're just a funny guy. Um,
Yeah.
it's kind of, it's like maybe you didn't ask. Or for me, the way I reflect on that is that maybe I didn't ask the right question, so I only brought the funny side out of that person. I didn't get the deep side. I didn't get the, vulnerable side. I didn't get the confident side. I just got the funny side. I'm like, if I'm trying to add as much value as possible, I want to know as much about that person's characteristics and how they deal in every kind of situation, so I can potentially help them or just learn from them. And maybe, I don't know, me, I'm a big extreme ownership kind of guy. You know, that Jocko Willing principle. Like
Yeah.
always, every interaction.
Actually,
Huh?
for like listeners and also for myself, like explain what you think of when you think of the Jocko principle? Because I actually don't really recall like exactly
Yeah,
what it's about.
I think extreme ownership is, for me, the way I kind of explain it to people is it's just not playing that victim card.
Yeah.
Like regardless of the situation, and I mean regardless of the situation, any situation, there is probably something you could have done to prevent either that, and even if you can argue that maybe it wasn't, like you couldn't do anything to prevent it. I mean, what are you doing in the first place, and why are you feeling sorry for yourself?
Yeah.
For me, I always try and kind of, you know, construct situations in a way that it's, the most valuable. And if it's didn't come out the most valuable, it's like, okay, what did I do that allows me, what did I do wrong? So then it allows me to kind of improve. So if you have that victim mentality, I feel like sometimes you're just blaming it on other people a lot, and it gives you no room to improve. Because I mean, if you did everything right and it wasn't your fault, then I mean, there's no room to improve, correct? So for me, it's kind of like, because we have that Kaizen philosophy of continued progression, it's kind of a added characteristic of that. It's like if you take ownership of everything, you always have somewhere to improve. And it
Mm.
allows you to look at, each situation with a kind of a direct point of like, if it didn't go the way I wanted, what would I have changed? And I think you can,
Mm.
like, there's so many extreme examples like Jocko uses and everything, but like sometimes if, like, for example, you get in a car accident, right?
Yeah.
Were you running late and you were speeding, and then that's why you had a car accident, right? So even if someone ran up the back of you, were you kind of like in a mind frame of mind where you weren't driving correctly, or were you just not meant to be there at that specific time because you were running late, or you didn't
Yeah.
leave early enough, et cetera, et cetera? Like maybe a bad example, but
No,
kind of,
get where you're coming from with that. I think with the I think with that example, if you like generally if you take on board any shortcomings or any challenges or any like problems that arise and you feel like maybe you weren't entirely at fault and you decide to take responsibility for that, you shift yourself from I suppose like a victim, a less powerful place to, hey, I've created this, but that's okay. I'm going to find a solution. So like you empower yourself in those situations.
yeah,
And like let's use the car example you just talked about where you get into a car accident and you think, hey, I could have been could have left on time and maybe that wouldn't have happened. But I'd almost argue you could say, hey, look, this accident's happened and accidents happen. Could I have driven a little bit more safely? Yes, maybe. Could I have slowed down and anticipated, that a little bit more? Yes. But I think a bigger part of it is not blaming yourself for the accident, but saying, hey, this accident's happened. That's fine. Accidents happen. I'm going to do what I can to avoid it, but I'm not going to let this accident be like a defining thing for the whole day. Like these things just kind of happen. Because I know I did the opposite, where I'd reflect and be like, if only I didn't like catch up with Daniel that morning for coffee, then I wouldn't have hopped into the car and I never would have got into the accident. And it's just like, that's absurd. Yeah. And that's what goes through like a 18-year-old's mind when something big happens for the first
Yeah,
time. Or
yeah,
like your car breaks down or the tire goes flat,
yeah.
similar thing.
There's it's definitely kind of a hard one, but I try to make sure I'm the person learning from every single situation, regardless of what it is. And if you put yourself in a victim mentality, it's kind of, you can't do that because there's nothing to learn. So for me, it's just about, yeah, whether there's
I
a fault
think,
or not is not the point, but it's like who the fault lies on is probably not the point for me. It's kind of like, all right, put myself in a frame of mind where I'm taking ownership for every interaction, and I want to be the leader in every single situation and improve on it next time.
yeah,
Kind of make sure it gets better. So,
yeah. I think like you said, and this conversation sort of branched on from the original conversation around how you want to provide the most value when you're meeting someone for the first time. And your example was, you might make them laugh and maybe you haven't sort of got them like providing them value in some other ways. But I think like at the start of relationships or friendships, having like trust and sort of like that sense of having your walls down
oh yeah,
can help a
absolutely.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think yeah, no, that was just kind of an example of like, if I wanted to get more kind of deep into a conversation, you have to go past funny and shit like that. But
Yeah.
you're right. First interactions, if sometimes the best kind of icebreaker is always humor. And
Mm.
if someone's allowing themselves to be funny or allowing themselves to laugh, it kind of
Yeah.
builds kind of trust, I believe. Builds community, and community builds trust. It kind of makes you feel warm and welcome and like enjoying each other's actual presence. So,
Yeah.
which I think is half the battle sometimes because everyone's in their own heads trying to work out their own shit. And it kind of can feel like too much when you have to not necessarily, not necessarily perform, but like always be on your A game to try and provide value to other people. So,
Mm.
but yeah, there's so many like you read a lot of books and there's so many like different kind of things you can do at the start of an interaction of like to kind of break the ice and all that kind of stuff. But the one I feel the
Yeah.
worst most is like be genuinely like curious and inquisitive and like loving and positive and like just listen, which is something I'm trying to work on, is listen. Just like
Yeah.
be we all know that one person who's like really, really like if you're talking and for me it's like I know you're very inquisitive and your listening skills, and that's why you turn into journalist immediately because you're
Yeah.
like you want to know more. And for
Mm.
me, like that's a like big kind of barometer of you understanding people, I guess. Is if you're inquisitive and like really curious about them and who they are and everything about them, it breaks down walls immediately when you're not just talking about yourself and you want to know more about the other person.
Yeah, great. And just adding to that, I think we I think we had this conversation with when your partner was around and we were talking about like our weaknesses, right? And I think we're both genuinely like interested in other people. We got curiosity, but we get in our way sometimes. So at least I'm speaking for myself here, where I get excited when I meet somebody and I start thinking about what I want to leave them with, and it
Yeah.
suddenly it comes back to me, when like in those moments, like the interactions would be a lot more authentic if I was just kind of present and not thinking about, hey, Doc, Daniel's just said something. I want to say this thing, and I'm sort of stuck on that thought, and that might be like ADHD or like or something else, but but yeah, I get
Some of it. Yeah.
I do get a little bit of that. Just just listen, and like be present, rather than trying to get what you want to say out. Yeah.
Yeah. I think when I first kind of started learning all this stuff, and especially when I was young and started first learning about crypto, and I knew it was good for people to get into crypto, I was that like ridiculously persistent car salesman who was like, hey, crypto's good, crypto's good, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this. It's really good. You should do this. And it's kind of like, well, it's not any way to build like reputation and trust and like actually add value to someone. So from like reading a lot of mentorship books and a lot of leadership books and stuff like that, it's like asking questions to kind of change the way a person thinks and eventually get them on the path of thinking similarly the way that you do, so that you know they can challenge your own ideas that they have. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like adding little nuggets, but repetitively adding them, so that you know over a certain time they change kind of the way that they're thinking. They don't just memorize the information that you're telling them. You know, they change the actual way that they think, which I think is important in adding value to people.
Yeah. And I think more broadly, you know, show people and question them instead of telling them. So that makes people kind of try to come to their own conclusions. And I feel like we touched on this when we caught up with the other guys yesterday, and we were just, you know, having conversations around letting the other party or your audience or your listeners or the other side actually come to their own conclusions, instead of, if you want to be more persuasive, so this is in the context of being more persuasive, you want to let the other person come to their own conclusions, or let them think about what you're trying to persuade them about, instead of forcing it with brute force. Like, hey, have you invested in Bitcoin? I think you should.
Yeah.
I think you should.
Go
I think
do
you
it
should
right
take another
now.
look.
Yeah. No, it's such a hard one because, like, I think people have, you know, a lot of different views on this kind of topic. I'm like, yeah, and I heard someone say, it's like, yeah, but people are sheep, so you need to tell them what to do and how to do it, because that's, you know, the best way that they're kind of like, if you extrapolate how like schooling is, you know, you're building slaves is not the correct word, but you're building like people to work in like factories and stuff like that at all times. So people are built and taught to listen all the time. They're told what to do. So sometimes people can argue that's the best way to train them, is to tell them what to do and when to do it. But I don't know, when it comes to the way I was personally mentored and trained, and the way I kind of believe, you know, we're trying to build people, is to teach them actually how to think and to think differently and to challenge a lot of things, not just to, I guess, memorize similar to school and kind of be able to regurgitate, but not actually apply. Like you want these things to be a part of people, second nature. You want people to be able to kind of think about these things on their own without your continued interaction.
Yeah.
So I think like a good barometer for a mentor is like, or like a leader is like how much interaction you have to have with them. Or maybe a metric is the correct word. A good metric is like how much interaction you have to have with that person for them to kind of be progressing down the right path. Like it starts off as a lot. Like you have to have a lot of interaction with them to try and get them on the right path and the right thinking patterns and the right neural pathways. And then as it grows, they kind of come into a person that is inquisitive and curious and kind of challenges all the things that they were just second nature in the beginning. And then they start kind of building upon ideas and creating new ideas, and finding out new information, and then all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. It depends on the material and what's being taught as well. In the case, in your example, with investments, with trading, with you know, just general like stock market related things or crypto related things, sometimes there is a better way to just deliver the information so that they get the foundations before there's the inquisitive side. And that comes from hey, like skip all the noise so you can understand the important basics first, and then you can kind of be inquisitive. It sounds like where you're sort of coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to help them. Like I feel like people are like this, and then they have these amount of paths that they feel like they're about to take, like we are incredibly lucky to kind of be on a path that seems to be working. We have like actual results. So for me, it's kind of just guiding them back to that path and then helping them build upon that path in their own kind of time. Because this shit does take time, by the way. Like people, I think sometimes people forget is like, I don't know, how many years have I been doing this? I don't know, 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
Like just to feel comfortable having a conversation about this kind of stuff. Like you've been doing it
at least
a decade now.
I feel like I dabbled a decade ago, but really the last 4 or 5 years has been where we've taken it a bit more seriously and been a lot more inquisitive and actually practicing. So,
but it's like I don't know, it leads back to that whole overnight success kind of thing. It's like I'm not as successful as I want to be. I'm not done, but like I have a certain amount that I'm really happy and proud of at the point. It didn't happen yesterday night. It started 6 years ago when I started like listening and changing my habits and doing all the small things and those cliche things of like the average 5 people around you, et cetera, like all those cliche things. It's like they are cliche, but a lot of them actually have merit.
yeah, the general principle is good, but not like taken like with a regiment view. Like, all right, I'm just gonna choose 5 people. Doc, I really like you, but you're like number 6, so like cut. Like
yeah. I think people go wrong is like when they find like maybe 5 people they want to hang around with, they find like a person just a bit better than themselves. Like, all right, for you to kind of really change your entire environment, you need to find maybe like a really high class kind of person. And for the way we did that here is like we found like top 5 heroes. So like like you probably did something similar as well. It's like you have 5 heroes who are high A class people. Your Elon Musk's, your Jobsy, Conor McGregor, Warren Buffett, these kinds of people, high A class people, experts, best in their field, and you learn as much from them and you feel a part of their community as much as you can. And it naturally an extension of that is you will progress and or be the 6th person, as the cliche saying goes.
That's that's like that is the idea that you can have mentors that you never meet in person, but you can mirror or you can study and you can learn from them.
Yeah, exactly. I think like that's probably where I first started my journey of like top 5 heroes, is finding those people and changing my kind of is it mental diet or the kind of the media consumption I'm consuming, changing all that. And I think a lot of people we have a community problem at this point in time because a lot of people just hang around with the same people and they go down the same paths and maybe they want something different but they don't know how. And I think learning from those A-class people and kind of gaining their wisdom and their principles that they live life by is detrimental to someone's kind of self-improvement or personal development kind of journey starting and it actually turning into something.
I think I really like having the people who people that like they usually come up as people you look up to, right? Or like your your inspiration, like the people that inspire you. And I suppose like I really like using those kind of people as macro kind of like mindset, and I'm always interested in their sort of like psychology around how like their views, their beliefs, their values in life, but not necessarily what they do like individually, because their individual things, like what they do for training and stuff, might not apply to you because you're not, there's a sequence, right? When you're launching, say like a rocket into space, there's a sequence, right? You're kind of going through, you're checking things off. There's a checklist, and then you kind of hit the big red button that launches, right? you can't skip ahead. There's a sequence. You can't just hit that big red button.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same when you're kind of following, for example, people you look up to, but they're closer to the end than they are at the start, and you might be at the start. So
Yeah.
and that's the same with mentoring, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like your point of understanding their values and like more how they work and their principles of life and stuff like that, that's way more important than, well, for a certain person, like, one of my heroes is obviously Elon Musk because of his work ethic and all that kind of stuff. But I don't listen to him to learn about fucking rockets.
Yeah.
Personally, I couldn't give a fuck about rockets.
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing landing itself, that's some dope shit. Like that, I don't know how that's possible. That's
The
beautiful.
self-landing ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's ridiculous. But, like,
Insane.
I'm not interested in learning about how and that actually works because it's not relevant to me. I'm not going to be a goddamn aeronautical engineer or whatever they call them, aerospace. But the way it kind of works and what he does to kind of make that an outcome, that's impressive to me.
And I suppose the beginnings, or like the history, or like what came before the person them today for, like where they've come from, is something that I'm becoming a bit more curious on. And like since yesterday's conversation, I feel like it's left a bit of an impression that's gonna sort of like, not sure what to make of it, but I'm gonna sort of let it simmer a little bit. And it's the idea of like understanding where someone's come from, or understanding where you've come from, or understanding where this podcast has started, or like the reason why you're getting into something, and telling the entire story instead of judging someone based on one snippet or one piece of content like we're talking about now, without knowing each other. And I think that's why we're doing podcasting and long format, because the people that are listening each week, they're slowly getting to see our personalities and understand our backstory in different aspects. So then that gives us a credibility into, providing information which might be relevant to them.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think providing context for people is important. Helps them learn, helps them understand, and it also, like, knowing kind of like the chat we had yesterday with the boys, and the boys were explaining a little bit more of their origin stories, and it was a beautiful conversation. It was awesome to really get into the gritty and understand where they've come from. It allows you to kind of maybe respect's not the correct word, but definitely, I respect the boys more from where they've come from, and it kind of, it's a nice.
Do you want to elaborate a little bit for like the people listening, what we mean by origin story? Because I suppose we throw that term around a lot because it's got a ring to it. But what does that actually mean when we say
like maybe use a big we kind of characterize it with a silly word, maybe origin story, but essentially it's just like it's the beginning of them, like where they've come from, what kind of work they've put in to become the person they are, what they were thinking back then, what actually happened in their life. Like it's literally just in a kind of like a story of who they used to be and where they've come from, and kind of different environmental factors, different people in their life that have changed things, like just providing like context for who they are now, I guess.
That's really well put.
What an origin story is. I forgot my goddamn point. What was I saying?
I might have derailed the conversation a bit, but
doesn't matter.
We were.
What was I saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think, the point there, I guess, really is to provide content. Oh, I know what I'm saying. I think one of the problems like we have in the world today is like such short form content. It doesn't, and this whole cancel culture shit, like it doesn't provide context for who those people are. So when you hear a snippet, or you like someone takes a goddamn small little mini clip from a podcast or from a video or anything, like it doesn't provide context of that kind of scenario they were in, doesn't provide context of who they have been previously. And there may be a valid reason why they are saying this, like they've come up with certain kind of, different environmental factors, different experiences. Like they could have a valid point and it's just like different to yours, but you don't understand the context of what made them say that or made them think that or made them think in that kind of way. And we forget a lot of the times that when we're just hearing like a 30-second clip, more often than not, there's an hour-long context to that 30-second clip. And one thing like I know we're going to do, and like anytime we put out small clips, and definitely with Hardcore, what we're going to do is make sure we preface like, hey, if this is a small clip, this is like the top of the funnel. Go and listen to the long form because it creates the picture, creates a story, creates the context, and you'll get more value from it than just listen to this little soundbite.
Yeah.
I think,
yeah, I think that's really well put, and you've raised that a few times, and it makes me think about it quite a bit. That, you know, especially when you've got say like this podcast we're talking about, you know, like you said, if there's 3 minutes in it and we've just talked about how great Amazon is and all the innovation they've done, and then we kind of have a joke in passing and say, you know, there was an issue with this one order or like this delivery, and like you'll never use it again. And it's like I've just spent 98% of the conversation talking about how great Amazon is, and you heard the 2% that I've complained about it, and that's your impression of it. And I think like the example too is in trading, right? So or like when you look up to celebrities, or you look up, or even if you go through your Instagram, someone might be popular in your social circle, you're seeing a highlight of something that might not indicate how much work that's gone into it or indicate what else they're considering. So like, let's go really granular, right? So you've got a trade for Amazon that you're hoping to execute sometime next week, and and there's certain parameters, and you're saying, hey, if the price reaches this point, you're going to enter the trade with this position size, but you might not have context into what your thinking is or your reason for getting into that trade and what would constitute a reason to not get into that trade. So like, you see a lot of that on Twitter, you see a lot of that on YouTube, where people say, hey, you know, this is how I made $10,000 or 300%, but you don't have the context into how they did it, and all you sort of see is leverage, and you see 300%, and you're like, okay, I see those two things, so that means I need to do those two things in order to get the same results, but you're missing the whole picture.
I think it comes back to me for like that point of like value first, of always thinking about the client and the customer and the client, the audience. It's like that 30-second or 2-minute or 3-minute clip that doesn't provide context is not valuable for that person, because it sends them on like a tangent or a path that's going to lead them to more confusion. Like if you just hear 300% and leverage, you have pain coming up. Like your future is going to be painful unless you get extremely lucky. It's very simple. So like, not understanding if that person used leverage, or, you know, they were able to get that 300%, like, did they just study for 15 freaking years to understand how it all works? And then they were in the right place at the right time, the right financial kind of, they have the right financial ability at that time. You know, their portfolio looks a certain way for them to be able to actually take that risk of that leverage. Like it's just, that not providing context, not providing, you know, any kind of backstory for people to be able to really understand the entire picture and how it all works is, I don't know, in my opinion, very dangerous. Like it can, especially when we talk about trading and investing, you know, there's actual financial like losses there that you can take. Like that's actual, like it's going to really affect your immediate and your short-term position if you're losing lots of money just due to lack of context kind of information. But if, you know, and you know, the less severe people can argue is like if someone just says something that leads them down a tangent and they waste their time, you know, arguably it's just as important to not waste people's time. Like provide context for stuff. And that's what I see everywhere. Like people, back to the Instagram thing, like people don't provide context of how, if they actually have those things, how they got them. So I made $10,000 this month. Good on you, mate. How did you make $10,000 a month? And did you just spend the last 10 years grinding your ass off to create that kind of $10,000 a month? And you're trying to tell a guy that, hey, you can have this in 2 weeks. What the fuck are you doing? That's not how you got it. And that's the thing that pisses me off. It's like you didn't put that effort in. You didn't put that effort in for no reason. You put the effort in to get to a certain point, right? Provide people with the context that this is what it takes. Don't just tell people that, hey, in 3 days or in 3 weeks you can make $10,000 a month from this goddamn drop shipping course. Hey, no, you can't. It doesn't exist that way.
I think the message there then potentially is to understand if you're watching content and context isn't provided, try to be curious about the context in what something is being said, so you understand fully that message and where it's sort of coming from.
I think kind of bring it full circle is why we want to create people who think similar or think differently is they can look at something like that and understand that there must be context. Like a lot of people we see unfortunately are in financial positions that are not ideal. They're hurting, they're trying to find out who they are, etc., etc. Every stress in the world hitting them right now, and then they hear like you can make $10,000 a month, which I think is going to solve all their problems. But that's dangerous. So we're trying to create people who think in a way, who think strongly, who think differently, think with the correct mindset, so that when you see those kind of things, you are able to think the way we are, and have the conversations that we can have now. But if you don't change kind of the mindset, you kind of just create if you don't change the mindset, then people are going to be left open to that trap and those traps all the time. I think we touched on reflection, and you gave me a nice little compliment. I reflect back on conversations and like that. Like you were saying, you were very interested in that. Do you do something similar now?
I've started thinking about the interactions I have with probably more so when a good result happens or something bad happens. So I'll think, okay, that didn't go the way I wanted that to go. What could I have done differently? Or if something goes really well, I think, what made that go well, and how do I get that better result again? How do I replicate that? So I don't do it for every experience, but if I get into like a bicker with my girlfriend, or we finish a podcast and other people say it's great, but then I kind of reflect and watch the video again, I think it was average, then I'll kind of look back and think about what could have been different and why I think it's different, and try to sort of see it from a few perspectives, from my own perspective, from your perspective, from the listener's perspective, instead of just focusing on what I could have done better in the podcast. And I think we do that naturally. Just we're getting better at kind of thinking about how things are being perceived, not just how we plan on delivering it.
I think you touched on something there that's like something really big to me, is like trying to put yourself in other people's shoes. Kind of harping on emotional intelligence and all of those kind of principles, but being able to view from that person's kind of point of view, it allows you to construct a better environment for them to feel safe in, and for them to be able for you to be able to add as much value to them as well. So I think self-reflection is pretty important, but I don't think a lot of people do it. They're kind of just stuck in their own heads of like, but
I think like two things that I'm working on, and I think is helping a lot, is having trying to be clearer with what message am I actually trying to say. So Jenny made a comment saying in the last podcast, you try to talk faster than your brain can process things. So like, it's another way of saying you're not that smart, but you're trying to talk faster than your neurons can fire off. So I don't know if you can tell, but today I'm trying to take things a little bit more slower, and I think the conversation is going better because I'm not just thinking about what I'm saying. I'm letting you speak, and I'm trying to be a bit more like slowing down the pace of the conversation a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean that's the way I can do the whole. Well, I actually like the whole Russell Brand kind of way of communication. It's very quick and uses big words and kind of confuse a little bit, and what I just did then. But I prefer the kind of relaxed vibe, conversation, thought process. Like what I do sometimes is when I don't know an answer, and maybe it happens sometimes in this podcast as well. It's like I just kind of think about it a little bit, or if I'm missing a word, I just think about it a little bit. And I think a lot of people they're concerned or they're worried or about that kind of like silence point in there. Sometimes we kind of try and fill gaps with that. You know, we never want that silence because we don't think it's valuable for people. But for me, I argue that that silence is me thinking, which allows me to say something considerably more valuable, or something I make sure that I genuinely understand and truly believe.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can catch ourselves sometimes that doesn't really happen often, but sometimes I kind of get on a tangent. I haven't thought about something so much, and I'm just throwing ideas out where they're not kind of valuable or helpful. It kind of, if people think that's the point of view, then it's gonna send them down like a different kind of track. But I think your brain actually works the slow, like not to say like you're dumber, but I think it works that slow way because of your like inquisitive kind of curiosity of like take it slow and work through conversations, and it's like very passionate, and I think that actually is you.
Absolutely. And I overanalyze things, so it means that I've got multiple conflicting ideas, which means that if I just speak and don't think things through, it comes out as a jumble. Whereas like most people might be kind of clear in the way they would respond to something, so they've only got like one or two choices, whereas I'm maybe factoring in sometimes things that are irrelevant, sometimes things that are relevant, but then that also gives me a perspective that sometimes is a bit different to what, you know, the other person would have thought otherwise, but it just takes a bit longer to kind of convey what I'm trying to say.
I think that's real wise. And like just from my point of view, like I would much prefer you take your time. Like I don't just relax. Like I don't know, you know me, bro. I said it last night as well. Like there are no obligations. This is just us having conversation. And we started this the first episode, which I still believe like this here is us practicing. It's trying to 100%. Find and kind of really understand our communication styles, how we communicate, what's the best way to communicate, how well is that communication style received. This is what it's about, and people will find value in these conversations, but they'll find the value in like us just thinking through, and that's kind of how we do things.
On like communication and thinking of people that we think of when we think of great communicators, right? Personally, the ones that we can relate to, maybe like Russell Brand, and then you've got there was a guy that you recently recommended to me. I really liked his vibe. He was kind of really slow, but he's drinking his tea, and he's just
I think is it Hinge, his YouTube channel? Let me check.
That's right. Is it Hinges? Did you say HIN?
HINDZ.
Yeah, Hinges. Yeah. So 2 different communicators. One that is eloquent and almost speaks like in poetry, and he like speaks really fast, and he'll use colorful language, and you think people who speak quickly are intelligent sometimes, but how much you actually retain is not a lot. And then you've got someone like him, Hins, and you get just as much value out of it, if not more, from someone like that. It's just different communication styles. So I think you just make it work.
I showed you that Hinge guy because like I think he's very similar to in the way that you kind of are received.
Yeah.
When you're on point, you like that's how I receive you. Very wise, very calculated, articulate, very passionate, very understanding of one's own thoughts, kind of has cultivated an idea and a thesis, and then is trying to communicate it in the best way.
Yeah.
Russell Brand, like I'm fascinated and I love sales. So Russell Brand for me he's like a performance.
Yeah.
He's like that circus you go to, you're like, what is happening? It's so much stimulus. It's just beautiful. And a similar kind of communication styles like Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And I'm trying
What do you think makes those two like why is it so easy to listen to those two people?
Hims or Russell Brand?
Sorry, Russell Brand and Jordan Peterson.
I mean, I haven't really thought about it that much, but I believe just off first kind of things is they actually have thought behind their ideas and what they're actually communicating. It's not like the first time they said it.
Yeah.
Like they've thought about how, and like, I genuinely, this is not joking, I've genuinely practiced sometimes what I'm going to say. And sometimes it feels like they understand exactly what kind of message they're trying to move across to the audience. So they so deeply understand what it is they're communicating about that they could communicate it in 5 different ways, 100 different ways, or 1,000 different ways. They could use different words all the time. And I think when people understand what it is they're talking about, they are more articulate and more clear.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I noticed about Russell Brand is he's got a really eloquent way of seemingly starting a conversation, going sort of deeper, and then providing sort of, starting like giving the big macro picture and then going really granular and then bringing it back to the original point. And you're like, how did he just like connect, 3 different points back to that first point and then explain it like they're all interconnected, like, and he does that really well, I think.
I think they're trying to, like that kind of clarity of storytelling. There's like 2 different ways of doing it. It's the way Russell Brand does it. He does it really quickly and efficiently, and it's like, what is happening on? And then you go, oh my God, that makes sense. And then Hins is kind of like a slower, you understand each kind of word. And like Jordan Peterson's like, you start here. Russell Brand's like, you start here, you go, and then you get here. And you're like, oh shit, okay, that makes sense. Hins is like,
calculated, slow, sort of, not from an anxious place. Different communication styles. I think they both work really well. If we wanted to go for like the Russell Brand approach, we'd literally get like the most interesting bits of this podcast and just speed it up to 3 times and just play that back.
I'm not smart enough to do it like Russell Brand. He used words that I don't even.
He's a thesaurus.
I question if they're actually in the dictionary.
I agree. There have been times where I'm like, he's just made that word up, dude. Like,
he just makes it. But he's a social engineering wizard. The dude understands human interaction. He understands what people are thinking and what they want, and he's built for shows, built for presentation, man.
There's this word, right? And it's not that big of a word, but I always question whether it's actually a word, and it's beautify. So like, it's so beauty and beautify. So like, I'm gonna beautify your bed. I'm just like, that's not a word. Like, surely
it can't be a word. It just seems like it doesn't. It's just like a so lazy kind of word. I'm just gonna beautify it instead of saying I'm gonna go make it beautiful.
I prefer the latter. Like the former just sounds.
Yeah, that's my kind of thing. That's
first impressions, and we've covered really interesting conversations today, I've got to say.
I think it's so us, if that makes sense. So this is how we communicate. Like if you were sitting
Yeah.
right next to me, we'd communicate the exact same way. And I think value comes in many different kind of ways. Like a lot of people just see value immediately as me giving you information in a very, efficient way. Not you, in the audience, and so, you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
like idea that we're really trying to focus on at the moment, I am, is like the value of like, I don't know, community, or value of engagement, or people feeling like they're a part of something. Like, so this is how we communicate. I'm guarantee there are other people who just communicate like this and listen like this and just want to have their own thoughts on this conversation. Like, put them in the comments. But like, people, I think sometimes, like when it comes to value, they're so obsessed of like, here it is, 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 here it is. And I think value can also be just feeling a part of something. And just listening to this conversation makes you feel like you're one of the boys, or you're one of the girls in the community. Like we're just having fun with it, and we're just chatting about things that we'd already chatted about, to be very clear.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in this long format, we definitely allow like listeners or people that don't personally know us get a sense of who we are. When sometimes, like in contrast, if I were to make a video like I was doing so for a little bit on my YouTube channel around investing, I'm not being authentic. I'm trying to be high energy, which my natural energy levels just isn't at. So it's a little bit more animated. It's a little bit more on the delivery. That puts more pressure on what I'm saying. And I'm not very clear, or like, at least people think like I speak well, but I haven't conveyed the message as clearly as I think I could have, because I'm so focused on trying to be like presenting rather than just having a conversation. That's why I like this format a lot.
Yeah. I don't know. Like we've been looking into it recently of like, examples of people with podcasts, and do they really up their energy to a point where it's like, absurd, like action and listen kind of thing. But from what I can tell, that people, they may start an intro of like, hey, what's going on, guys? How you doing? But then it really like mellows out and levels straight into just a conversation. And
Yeah.
like thinking about just social engineering principles, like if you're having a conversation with someone in real life, I'm not yelling.
Yeah.
Nor am
That's
I
true.
acting like it's a fucking TV show.
Yeah.
Like The Price is Goddamn Right. I'm just out here just chatting away on ideas that I've thought about. And that's about it. Like my tonality right here, I can change it up in the way I want. Like I can change it any way I want, because I believe, sometimes something has different emphasis. I believe really that this has a really, what I'm about to say is a really important point. So I'll put more emphasis on it with my tonality, but doesn't mean I'm going to start talking like a goddamn presenter.
And it doesn't mean I'm going to bring out a saucepan out of nowhere again. Or am I? For the people listening, that's a fountain. That's a fountain joke. It's a ute.
Fountain of knowledge.
Yeah. It's just we're actually just doing a podcast at a waterfall, and he's just Daniel's a little thirsty.
Yeah, he's always thirsty. That's how I roll. Nah, I don't know, dude. It's like, I think we're getting kind of to the point now where we're just like today again. We literally didn't have a plan, and last night I could tell you were stressing about not having a plan.
Yeah,
we don't.
Yeah, a little bit.
You were stressed about not having a plan, right? And it's obvious, but we communicate so well that we can communicate about anything. But there's been certain pauses in this where, like, it just takes us a second to kind of, all right, where do we want to go next? But what do I want to talk about next?
Yeah.
Like having to construct a what are we going to talk about, for me feels weird. You know, and it takes energy away from me. If I'm having to perform, it takes energy. I don't want this to take energy because I want to do it forever.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, well.
Yeah, I think the overarching ideas and like topics and brainstorming is valuable, but the regiment or like having to cover off certain points puts pressure on the delivery, or like what we sets of as expectations for ourselves if we kind of go down that side. Yeah,
I think we should ask people, like, what do they prefer more? They prefer like a presentation, because if you want a presentation, like, I mean, there's people out there who do it, but if you want a conversation where like we're just being us and having a chat and enjoying, like, arguably, if we didn't have things to do, we'd probably jump on a call and do this anyway, just not record it.
Yeah, the conversations wouldn't be too different.
No. So they're deep. I'm trying to learn from your wisdom of you being 53. So.
Did you say 53? You get away with a lot in podcasts.
You didn't laugh at the start. I was like, oh shit, you didn't like that one.
That's just coming back to the slow brain. So I think Jenny will get a giggle out of that.
Jenny will get a giggle?
Yeah.
That's it. All right, I think we wrap it up.